Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Jelani Cobb, and I'm the Dean of Columbia Journalism School. Welcome to the John Chancellor Award ceremony. We're coming together this year at a challenging time for the world and for this campus. You may have noticed this. It's a challenging time for many campuses around the country as well. I can't help but be reminded of another campus that is directly tied to this celebration, the campus in Little Rock, Arkansas, where a young man named Ira Lippman met a journalist named John Chancellor and became his source during another challenging time, the desegregation of Little Rock High, of Central High School in Little Rock in the fall of 1957. Now, here in New York, and then back in Arkansas, courage was essential. The courage to bear witness and report the facts. That courage is the foundation of for this gathering today. It's what we instill in our students. And this is an important moment where they can learn both from the events around them and from journalists like our honoree, Phil Williams. This award honors the legacy of one of the great broadcast journalists of our time, John Chancellor. It was established in 1995 by Ira A. Lippman, a great friend and generous supporter of journalism and a great friend of Columbia Journalism School. When people ask me how I got to Columbia, I typically use a kind of very threadbare dad joke. Or people say, how did you get to where you are? It's like I took the one train, got off at 116th, made a right, couldn't miss it. But the fact is that Ira played a crucial role in me coming here in 2016. He passed away in 2019, and in those 3 years, I had the opportunity to get to know him a little bit and to learn a great deal from him. And this event is an opportunity to remember him and his legacy. In addition to this award, Ira also created the Ira A. Lippman Center for Journalism and Civil and Human Rights here at the Journalism School. The center convenes leaders in journalism and civil rights and conducts research around social justice issues. I ran the center before becoming dean, and allow me to introduce you to the second director of the Lippman Center, Robe Embriano. So we're very proud and excited to have Robe in our community and eager to see where he takes the Lippman Center next. Now, it is my pleasure to welcome today's honoree, Phil Williams. He is the chief investigative reporter for NewsChannel 5's nationally award-winning investigative team in Nashville. He's been a household name in Nashville for decades. And in the last few months, he has entered into the national spotlight after taking on local politicians connected to right-wing hate groups. Featured in the Daily Beast, as you'll see today, championed by HBO's John Oliver, I want to point out that the Chancellor Board voted him this year's winner way back in June before all of this recent attention. As I said to him earlier, I was like, events around you just, they don't let up. And this, unfortunately, I feel like we got you here when you might also have been on deadline. But welcome and congratulations to you, Phil. A special welcome to all of your friends, family, and colleagues from Nashville News Channel 5 and Scripps who are here to mark your accomplishments. In this room, I don't need to remind you that local journalism plays an essential role in our communities. According to the Pew Research Center and Gallup polling, local news outlets are the most trusted sources for news among Americans. This is really crucial. We emphasize this all the time. At a point where we often wring our hands about distrust of news media, we consistently see that local news organizations are the organizations that people trust, that function in their communities and so on. And so the work that Phil Williams and the investigative team has been doing there is exactly the kind of journalism that's most crucial to us at this moment. And so, counter to what we actually know, trust in local news is actually on the rise. While we have all the problems that we have, we should also think about just how important that is. If you wonder why that is, I believe that hearing about Phil's career from his friends and colleagues may help explain the loyalty this audience has because of the impact that local reporting has. We're fortunate to have a stellar lineup of friends and colleagues here to help pay tribute to you and your career. Before we get started, I'd like to welcome some other special guests. Past Chancellor Award winner Donald McNeil Jr. is here. Welcome, Donald. There you are. I'd like to thank the prizes department for putting this event together, Abby Wright and Lisa Cohen. Where's Abby? Where's Lisa? Where's Abby? Thank you to the Chancellor Award Selection Committee for sharing their insights and values. So will the members of the committee please stand so they can be acknowledged. One of the things I can always say is that we always walk into that room perplexed because we have to go through all of the deliberations, but we always walk out of that room feeling really proud. And we walked out of the room, exceptionally proud. We had come to the decision that Phil Williams would be this year's honoree. Welcome to John Chancellor's daughter, Mary. And also with us today are two of Ira's three sons, Gus and Josh Lipman. So welcome, everyone. When Ira Lipman brought the John Chancellor Award to Columbia in 2005, he had the foresight to create the John Chancellor Scholarship at Columbia. Since then, more than 17 students with outstanding academic achievement and leadership qualities have received the John Chancellor Scholarship. Supporting the next generation of journalists is a meaningful way to support a vibrant, free press. Now, let's take a moment to remember John Chancellor in this short video profiling his life as a reporter and anchor at NBC News, and it is narrated by Tom Brokaw.
This is an essay on journalism, coming to you now from NBC News in New York, written by me, a reporter who's been around for a while. That's called a lead. Who, what, when, and where.
John Chancellor talking about his favorite subject. Hello, I'm Tom Brokaw. Journalism was always more than just a job to John. It was a craft, a calling, a civic duty. John loved being a reporter, and he devoted himself to it all of his professional life. He cared about the fundamentals, and his work was distinguished by uncommon clarity and restraint. All that made him a shining example to so many of us who followed. And John's values are embodied to this day in the award that bears his name. He didn't start as an anchorman. John's first love was print, Chicago newspapers, and it shaped his world.
This is John Chancellor on the 23rd floor of the Conrad Hilton.
He got into television when it was new, brought what he learned about journalism with him, and never forgot it.
The number of guards with the 9 Negro students has been considerably diminished.
John's civil rights reporting from Little Rock not only set a standard for television news, it won the respect of his print competitors as well.
I'm in custody.
And remember his famous line as he was escorted off the floor of the 1964 Republican Convention?
This is John Chancellor somewhere in custody.
Well, here's what he said on the air just before that.
I formally say that this is a disgrace, that the press should be allowed and the radio and television should be allowed to do their work at a convention on television.
It was no joke to John. There was a journalistic principle involved. He witnessed and reported on lots of history during his years on the air.
What we saw is impossible to forget and necessary to remember.
John Chancellor was among the best-known journalists in the world. but by choice and by temperament, he always took a back seat to the story itself.
There are many perplexities about this conflict.
He was determined to know and understand and explain the events of the day. To John, that was a public trust, and it was his passion.
There's a little secret about journalism. We would do it for free if that were possible, but they actually pay us to do it.
Since 1995, the John Chancellor Award for Excellence in Journalism has helped keep those values alive by recognizing them in others, some of the most talented, if not always the best-known journalists of our time. I know that John would be impressed with all of them and proud that they have been honored in his name. So, a final word of advice to us all from John himself.
Get it right. Do the job the way it's supposed to be done. There's an old saying in Chicago journalism that applies here. You say your mother loves you, check it out.
Were John Chancellor here, I would say hopefully it does not come to us doing it for free. Now, please enjoy your lunch. We'll be back shortly with our program honoring Phil Williams. Welcome back, everyone. And now to our program honoring Phil Williams. Unlike most other journalism prizes, this award recognizes sustained excellence and reporters who've shown a commitment over time to covering difficult subjects, like covering official corruption in your own hometown with courage and integrity. The John Chancellor Award honors journalists who consistently produce the highest quality reporting day in and day out without compromise. Journalists with courage and integrity whose work has had a significant impact for the public good. Phil Williams is certainly one such reporter. For more than 3 decades, he has set the standard for serious investigative journalism on the state and local level, holding elected officials accountable and making a measurable difference in his community year after year. His responsible and relentless journalism has sent dozens of people to jail, which is, I don't know why I smirked when I read that line. It's not a funny line, but it was also like, it just reminded me of like the metrics for our profession. And people like, you know, yeah, sure, you did this, but how many people have you sent to jail? Seriously. You know, in addition to having sent a bunch of people to jail, numerous political figures have resigned, and laws have been changed to promote safety, fairness, and good government. When you talk about reporters like this, a term you will frequently hear is dogged. Won't let go of a story, no matter where it leads. Sometimes that might be hyperbole or slight exaggeration of the actual effort that goes into the reporting. That is decidedly not the case here. Phil's work is truly dogged. He's a truly dogged investigative reporter. Let me give you a few examples. His relentless coverage of government malfeasance triggered the resignations of Tennessee House Speaker Glenn Casada, Nashville Mayor Megan Barry, Tennessee House Chair Jerry Cooper, and University of Tennessee President John Schumacher. After he confronted the GOP House leader Scotty Campbell about a sexual harassment investigation that had been swept under the rug, Campbell resigned within hours. Franklin's mayoral candidate, Gabrielle Hansen, was recently defeated following a series of Phil's investigations that included exposing her association with self-proclaimed white supremacists and neo-Nazis. And I'll remind you, this award recognizes courage. Phil's reporting has required courage at every turn. He's remained steadfast in pursuit of the truth, even when the subjects of his reporting have threatened his life, his family, privately and publicly. He has won local Emmys, a George Polk Award, and 4 DuPont Columbia Awards for his investigative work. Now, let's take a look at some highlights from Phil's career in this video that NewsChannel 5 put together.
I'm just wired to keep digging until I'm convinced I know the whole story.
Are you going to go through my trash?
Are you running a private business out of?
Absolutely not.
Is this an inquisition today? You want me to raise my hand and put my hand on the Bible?
What about the use of campaign funds for your daughter's wedding? Senator, do you have an answer about the use of campaign funds for personal purposes? No answers at all, Senator?
Governor, this involves one of your banks. Should the public not be allowed to listen in on this?
I was just looking around. Yes, sir.
Just looking around?
Yes, sir.
You're not here for the meeting?
I'm going to go back to my office now.
But you were here for the meeting?
I came, I thought I might sit in, yeah.
You have Metro employees in a Metro office on Metro time charging a fee that's going into your pocket.
It's a gratuity as I see it.
Out here on the interstate, interdiction officers have a choice. Conventional wisdom is that the drugs come in from Mexico on the eastbound side, but the money goes back on the west. It looks like that they're not concerned about stopping the drugs, that they just want the money.
That's what it looks like.
Is that the case?
And that shouldn't be the case, but that's what it looks like.
Inside internal emails obtained by NewsChannel 5 Investigates, we found evidence that here, inside Tusculum Elementary, some of the young children were allowed to drink lead-tainted water for an entire school year.
God forgives, but, the people of Nashville don't have to. And I also want to ask for their forgiveness.
Tonight, in an emotional interview, Nashville's mayor admits to an extramarital affair.
That affair with a Metro police officer who headed her security detail.
You were Sergeant Forrest's boss. Why did you not say at some point, if I'm going to have this relationship, he needs to be removed from my detail?
Yeah, that was a mistake, and I should have.
Up on the 20th floor, we step out into a part of Capitol Hill culture the public never sees. The man in the red tie lobbies for a number of clients, including the private prison giant CoreCivic and its millions of dollars in state contracts.
I'm sorry, sir. Gentlemen, this is a private event. You're welcome to be downstairs, but this is a closed event.
So the public is not allowed to see what's going on here?
This is a private event, sir. I hope you'll have a blessed day. Thank you so much.
Well, I was hoping for a different outcome, but I think that says a lot. Special interest lobbyists are able to stay in the room with the Speaker of the House, but because we had not shelled out $250, we're being kicked to the street. How are you, sir?
We wanted to give the East Tennessee Republican a chance to respond to the findings of our latest investigation of Tennessee's Capitol Hill.
As I understand, you admitted to sexually harassing this intern?
Give me just 5 seconds. Okay.
In fact, Scotty Campbell already knew we were investigating some serious allegations.
Hold on just a second.
About his relationship with at least one legislative intern, although he would soon divulge there was a second intern.
Which direction do I need to look for your camera?
Just look at me. I grew up in this community. I raised my son in this community. I want to make sure this is a better place to live.
The next time somebody's really getting under my skin, I'm just going to have a blessed day. I'm going to use that. Now, when we got this reel from NewsChannel 5 back in September, it inadvertently left out some of Phil's most recent reporting. But never fear, it caught the attention of HBO's John Oliver, who is a big fan of Phil's, by the way. And he himself gave us the update on Phil's ongoing investigation into Franklin mayoral candidate Gabrielle Hansen that impacted that race. So let's take a look at the excerpt from John Oliver's show last week tonight.
Let's just take a moment to acknowledge that reporter, Phil Williams, because he's been all over this story, and we featured his work on this show a bunch in the past. If you are a politician in Tennessee, Phil has his foot on your neck. His official NewsChannel 5 bio features a quote from a Nashville political strategist saying, "If the press calls, call your PR person. If Phil Williams calls, call your lawyer because you are in trouble." This is a bad, bad man. You do not around with Phil Williams. And it seems Gabrielle Hansen is currently in her finding out era when it comes to her dealings with him, because Phil has uncovered so much weird new context around her life. Just this week, Hansen was caught up in yet another scandal, this time involving an eye-catching group that showed up to support and protect her at a candidate forum.
The man on the left is Sean Kaufman, who has been described by the Stop Anti-Semitism watchdog group as, quote, a disturbed neo-Nazi and Holocaust denier with a documented history of violence and a massive cache of firearms. Then there's Brad Lewis. He's the operator of the Lewis Country Store on the far west side of Nashville, a store known for its extreme right-wing messaging. When the store recently went on the market, Gabrielle Hansen was the real estate agent who got the listing. A recent investigation by the Southern Poverty Law Center revealed how the second floor of the store was being used as a white nationalist fight club. Lewis responded in a post on Telegram calling himself an actual literal Nazi.
Ms. Henson, the people you're with had described themselves as literal Nazis. Is this the type of people you should be associating with?
Excuse me, Phil.
They have said they're literal Nazis.
Again, Phil Williams is just wrecking her, waving a cell phone in Hansen's face and asking, "So, do you hang out with Nazis or what?" And doing it loud enough for the whole row to hear.
Phil Williams has by choice focused his world-class talent and renowned work ethic on improving the community where he grew up. As John Chancellor began his career in local broadcasting, it's fitting that Phil Williams be recognized as the first local broadcaster honored with this award. Congratulations, Phil. Now to our program. We have 5 speakers, friends and colleagues of Phil's, to help us mark this special occasion. I'd like to invite everyone who is speaking about Phil to please come up to the stage. He can come around this way. Yeah, or this way, yeah. We're going to go chronologically, but you don't have to sit chronologically. Mm-hmm. As I mentioned, our custom is to go chronologically with this award, so we will start with someone who met Phil early on in his career. Our first speaker is Dwight Lewis. Dwight worked as a journalist for the Tennessean for 40 years as a reporter, editor, and columnist. He worked for the late legendary editor and publisher John Siegenthaler. Dwight has interviewed remarkable and notorious people alike, from civil rights hero, United States Representative John Lewis, to James Earl Ray, the assassin of Martin Luther King Jr. He retired in 2011, but he continues to write guest columns for the Tennessean on topics including gun violence and the legacy of the journalist Ida B. Wells. Dwight worked with Phil during his time at the Tennessean from 1986 to 1992, early in his career as a print reporter in Nashville. In 1990, Phil was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for Public Service for reporting in the Tennessean on corruption in the state's charity bingo industry. Please welcome Dwight Lewis.
Thank you very much, Dean Cobb. It was 29 years ago, in 1994, that I arrived on the Columbia University campus to serve as a juror in the Spot News category for the Pulitzer Prize. In 1995, I returned as a juror in the editorial cartoon category. Both times were very special to me, given the fact that I had been asked to help judge the best work in journalism. Being on this great campus today is even more special than in 1994 and 95, because I've been asked to come help salute and say a few words about my former Tennessean newspaper colleague and good friend, Phil Williams, as he receives the prestigious John Chancellor Award for Excellence in Journalism. There is no other place that I would rather be today. Phil Williams came to the Tennessean in 1986 and started work as a police reporter. If you talk to any other editor or staffer who worked with Phil at the Tennessean, I think they would tell you that since meeting him, he has always been humble. He is gracious instead of arrogant, and that is why people trust him. Some of you might have heard by now that in 1991, Phil, at the age of 30, who grew up in Nashville, went back as a Tennessean reporter to one of the city's 10 public housing developments, where as a teenager, he lived for about a year. He not only went back to his own old home place, he wrote a must-read story about his time living there. When he came to the Tennessean, Phil, an honors graduate of Middle Tennessee State University in Murfreesboro, didn't advertise to his colleagues that he had once lived in the Sam Levy homes, better known at the time as Settle Court, and where most of the people who lived there were poor. Also at the time Phil lived in Settle Court, at age 16, his family was the only white family living in the housing project. Phil wrote that Settle Court was living hell. He added that the housing project, because of the violence that often took place there, earned the nickname Little Vietnam. He also used his moving story to tell of the time when he came out of his apartment once and was surrounded by a group of teenage boys who tried to force Phil to buy a $5 bag of marijuana. When Phil refused to do so, he was knocked to the ground and beaten up. Fortunately, Phil was able to get up to his feet and run away from his attackers. And he has been running from Settle Court ever since then. When I lived there, the residents didn't have a voice, Phil wrote in the November 1991 story. I went back because I finally have a voice. At the Tennessean, Phil was not a one-time wonder. At Phil's urging in 1988, John Sigenthaler, the newspaper's late legendary editor, allowed him to go undercover to investigate an underground casino that was said to be operating in Nashville. Using the alias Jack Ferreira, supposedly in town as a salesman from Knoxville, Phil was told by the manager of the establishment that they weren't concerned about the police because Tommy Boner, the brother of Nashville's mayor at the time, Bill Boner, was one of 6 investors in what was said to be an adult boys and girls club. Later, the Tennessean wrote an editorial concluding that as long as it appears that the mayor's brother is getting favored treatment, all law enforcement suffers. Mayor Bill Boner has invited a crackdown against his brother. That invitation must be accepted with all deliberate speed. Still, Phil wasn't through showing his talent as a top-notch investigator at the Tennessean, investigative reporter at the Tennessean. In fact, while he was posing as a high roller at Club 314, Phil was leading an investigative team looking into how Tennessee's charity bingo system had been corrupted by professional gamblers, concerned more with greed than charity. When the newspaper's probe was completed and a series of articles and editorials had been written, at least 25 people, bingo lobbyists, bingo operators, lawmakers, former lawmakers, and a state election commissioner had been indicted or pleaded guilty to charges in connection with the bingo scam. The investigation and series of articles written by Phil Williams and his team resulted in, and you just heard Dean Cobb say that, resulted in the Tennessean being a Pulitzer Prize finalist. Phil Williams had a great work ethic. Frank Sutherland, who followed John Siegenthaler as the top editor at the Tennessean, told me recently, Phil was always pursuing the story, Sutherland added. He was also great at reporting the story and finding and filling the holes in it. He had a great First Amendment code when he was at the newspaper. He followed the obligation to serve the public and to make government transparent. Phil, I am sure John Siegenthaler is looking down from you from the great beyond and smiling on you today. But I'm also sure that he's telling his friends who are there with him, Bill Willis, his law friends, Bill Willis and George Barrett, that Phil Williams just might have been the best hire that the Tennessean ever made in its newsroom. And I'm sure John Chancellor is smiling also. Several years ago, a number of years ago, I was talking to Sandy Van Oker, and I was saying, did you cover Little Rock? And he said, no, that was one of the things the great John Chancellor did. So congratulations to you and your wife and your son, Jack. And I just want to say thank you for allowing me to be a part of this very special day.
Our next speaker is Stuart Watson. He and Phil have been colleagues and friends for decades. Today he is a podcaster, author, and award-winning investigative reporter with more than 30 years of experience in journalism, broadcasting, and teaching. He's published and narrated a compulsively readable memoir with the amazing title, What She Said and What I Heard. And even like an even better subtitle, How One Man Shut Up and Started Listening. He launched the media brand Man Listening and a podcast by the same name. He and Phil met at WKRN in Nashville when they both started working on television as on-air reporters in the 1990s. Please welcome Stuart Watson.
They told me I have 4 minutes, so I said what Phil would say, I'll take 5. They told me not to make this personal, and so I cut out all the stuff about what a generous lover Phil has always been and how that mustache tickled. It was the mustache era, you must understand. This was post-Walter Cronkite, along with Geraldo Rivera, but before Ron Burgundy. So we're all rocking the Ron Burgundy mustache. But we are not doing the keep it classy reporting, thanks to Phil. Phil came over from the Tennessean. We were his baptism by fire at WKRN, which once stood for Night Ritter News, but it went through a conversion and was bought by a family, the Youngs. And I have to credit, I'm going to do a name check of a couple other people in this room. It was because of Bill Lord that we won a Peabody, and it was because of Phil Williams. Because I could go to seminars and read books, but Phil really modeled what it meant to be an investigative reporter, and I always looked up to him, and I was always going to school on him. So our newsroom was led at the time, and this was a part of history that I don't know will ever be repeated. for a local TV newsroom to be run by 3 Vietnam combat veterans: the news director, the assistant news director, and the operations manager. The news director didn't have sense enough not to go to Vietnam to avoid a traffic charge. The assistant news director went to West Point and played for Bobby Knight on the basketball team, and the operations manager was a tunnel rat to go down into the tunnels where he knew not what to clear them out. And that makes the most hardened combat Marines shiver. And so what that meant is, on the worst day, if the station went off the air and went to black and nothing was going out, they'd go, no incoming. And so it was just the right place to take risks, and that's what we did. Bill Lord wanted to cover the Tennessee legislature by night. He wanted to see those rooms. He wanted to see who was paying the check. You know, he wanted the video, the hidden camera video of the lobbyist, of the Golden Goose pulling out his checkbook and paying for people. And so what that meant was that I would go and sit at the bar with the hidden camera and drink bourbon all night and watch these guys do it. And then I would come by in the morning and tell Bill he owed me comp time for the time I'd been there, at which Bill said, "We will either pay your bar tab or we will give you comp time, but we will not pay you to drink," which I said was a wage and hour issue, but I never pressed it. That's the environment that Phil came into. And when he first did the on-camera checks, we were like, I don't know. Repeat after me, Phil. Live, local, late breaking. Live, local, late breaking. Again, Phil. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. Phil told me once that he had, his dad had applied for a job, and the job went to someone who had greased some palms. That was how the patronage system works. Those of us who are involved in investigative reporting, we usually get there because of some personal reference. And he thought I was wrong. He had a sense that it was wrong. And Phil has always been dialed in on the ethics. He has been consistent throughout. He has values, he has courage, and he sticks to it. I'm just amazed he's kept a job this long. And all the changes in management and all the turnovers and all the wacky consultants and the just crazy stuff, Phil could keep his mouth shut when I couldn't, which is the reason he's still employed and I'm not. But it is a great tribute to Scripps, I think, and to the management at WTVF, without naming all of you, that you hadn't fired the guy, you know, and that's because he comes up aces. He's really hard to fire. I'll say one other thing, and I won't get into too much detail, but the greatest thing Phil ever did was Jackson. And I know just a lot of the story of the man as a person and a human being. Someone who has compassion, just oodles of compassion for people. And that's not something you hear in investigative reporting very often. Just one of the finest men I've ever met. It's a great honor, my friend.
Our next speaker is Phil's boss, Lynn Plantinga. Lynn's career trajectory is a unique one. She's been at NewsChannel 5 for her entire career. While in college at Vanderbilt, she took an unpaid internship at WTVF in the hopes of padding her law school application. But instead of going to law school, she fell in love with journalism. She graduated from Vanderbilt and accepted an entry-level position at the station, which is owned by E.W. Scripps. Working her way up through the ranks, she is now the EW Scripps Vice President and Regional Manager, overseeing stations in Cleveland, Buffalo, Cincinnati, and Lexington. Back when she was an assistant news director, she recruited Phil from the ABC affiliate WKRN in Nashville in 1998. Later, she became general manager, standing with him when various forces came at him, and she nominated him for this award. Please welcome Lynn.
So what an honor to be here representing News Channel 5 and EW Scripps and celebrating my longtime coworker and friend, Phil Williams. I don't remember a time as a journalist that I wasn't aware of Phil. I followed his award-winning work at the Tennessean, and I coveted what he did for the competition. When that station moved away from their commitment to investigations, we finally had our chance. We assembled a group, a team of Mission Impossible wannabes who arranged clandestine meetings with Phil to lure him to our side. And it worked. Those first few months, his old contract terms prevented us from showing his face or putting his voice on television. But we were not going to hide our light under a bushel basket. So Phil did investigative work that other people voiced, and every one of those stories began with a giant signature on the screen, produced by Phil Williams, so that everyone could know. We all know that good journalism is designed to hold the powerful accountable, to connect people, to improve communities. And there are stories that are designed just to fill time. The two are 1,000 miles apart on the map. And not many people have traveled as far in the right direction on this road as Phil Williams. But it's important for all of us as journalists and as media companies to keep in mind the direction in which we're headed and to be very careful with our intentions and our resources so that we have the support we need for that trip. When we hired Phil, News Channel 5 wanted then the same thing that we want today, to do work that matters. We didn't just fall into the decision to bring Phil in as a part of our team. It reflected a plan and a priority, and it has paid off for 25 years. This is a wonderful award for Phil, who clearly deserves it. And it is wonderful for the countless men and women in local media, in our company and across the country, who have their heads down right now, working every day to do journalism that is fair and that makes a difference. Phil made a difference from the day he walked into our newsroom. Others have spoken today, and you've seen some wonderful video about his impact, which cannot be overstated. And those who've been the focus of his reporting often don't like it one bit. He's been threatened and sued many times, and he's never flinched. He's also been supported without fail by a station and a company that considers his work to be key to our mission. Phil has stared down powerful people, prominent lawmakers, violent criminals, and as you've heard, a fight club full of neo-Nazis. If we added some snakes to this story, Phil's career could be an Indiana Jones movie. In recent years, I've seen Phil embrace a new level of wisdom that comes with time and experience. I think of his work around our broken system of juvenile justice, his thoughtful reporting about the role of lobbyists at the state capitol. He moves through his work with curiosity, not with foregone conclusions. He has become an iron fist in a velvet glove, and he is doing the best work of his life. Perhaps it's not a coincidence that Phil's life outside of work is flourishing. While I know he treasures this honor, his greatest treasure is his family. His son Jackson and his wife Cheryl support him on this exciting and unpredictable journey as a journalist. What on earth is next? What is Phil going to find over that next horizon? I don't know, but I can't wait to find out. And like the work and the man that we're here to celebrate, I'm confident that the trip will be extraordinary. Congratulations, Phil.
So, Lynn, we'll talk after for the pointers for when I want to recruit faculty. Next, we'll hear from Brian Staples. They say television news is a team sport, and now we will hear from Phil's right hand and partner in crime. A friend, photojournalist, editor, and producer with whom Phil has primarily worked for the past 25 years. Brian is the one recording people who would often prefer not to be on camera with Phil. Together, Brian and Phil make the confrontational interview, also called doorstepping, look easy, unfortunately for elected officials in Nashville. He is a senior investigative photojournalist, editor, and producer for NewsChannel 5 Investigations. Please welcome Brian Staples.
You nervous? First of all, when I got the call back a few months ago about this, I said, I think it's great that you guys are inviting all these people here to roast Phil Williams. And they said, no, not a roast. And I said, are you sure? And they're like, yeah, we're pretty sure it's not a roast. And I said, are you sure you don't want to change that format? And they said, no, is there somebody else we could talk to? I said, no, I'm the guy. I said, I've been working with Phil for the last 25 years. They said, 25 years? And I said, yeah. But in that time, you get to know somebody a lot over the last 25 years. We've been through a lot together, the death of our fathers, the birth of our sons. If we were at Subway right now having lunch, Phil would have a tuna on white with a little bit of pickle and a little bit of mayo. If we were at a Mexican restaurant, he would have a chicken taco salad with extra sour cream and a Diet Coke. And if we were at the station and he was telling me we were going to have a 45-second package, he would be a liar. That doesn't happen. So, needless to say, there's a ton of stories that I could tell you about Phil, but we don't have that much time. But I do want to tell you one specific story. Jelani mentioned earlier that Phil was a dogged reporter. I think the word I would use is more tenacious, is the way I would describe it. And I want to tell you a story that happened back in 2000. I started working with Phil in 1999. And so we had been working together a year and a half, and we were doing a story about off-duty vice cops working for strip clubs. This story eventually led into police corruption and involved Nashville's gambling godfather. It also involved the godfather's son, Brad Lewis, who you saw earlier, who was the gentleman, the neo-Nazi with the stuff on his face. So Phil calls me into his office one night. We're working on a story for 10 o'clock. He says, I just had a meeting with Metro police officers, and they said, we've been hearing some things out there about some threats, and we feel like you may need these. And they opened the trunk of a police car. And there was a gun and a bulletproof vest. Phil's not big on guns, so he took the bulletproof vest. So he told me this story, and he asked me, he said, do you want to continue? Because I don't know where this is going to go. If you want to get out, now's your chance. But I could tell at that time that my friend needed me. And I told him, you know, the longer you sit here jabbering, the less time I'm going to have to edit the story. So we laughed, and then it got quiet. And Phil looked at this photo. He turned and looked at a photo on his desk. And the photo is of him and Jackson. Jackson was probably a year old at that time. Phil seated on the bed, Jackson on his knees, both of them looking at the camera. No doubt, father and son, no doubt. And he stared at the photo, and he looks at it, And I asked him, is it worth it? Is it worth what you're going through, what you potentially may go through? And he stared at the photo and he said, if we don't do this, nobody else will. And he turned to me with tears in his eyes. And it wasn't sadness, it wasn't fear. It was a steely resolve. And he said, I can't let them win. I can't let them get away with this. And at that point, I realized that I was dealing with something very different. This was not a reporter. This is not somebody that's going to look at a press release and just regurgitate what's on it. This was something different. This was a true believer. This was a journalist. And at that point, I didn't know how long this ride was going to go, but I knew it was going to be a ride for a while. I'm honored to have been on this ride with you. And I'm also honored that finally, Columbia has realized something that I've known for 25 years. And that is Phil Williams is the best damn journalist in the country. Thank you.
Brian, thank you for that. And now it is the tradition of this award to hear from someone with a different perspective on our honoree, someone from outside journalism who has been a source at one time or another. Please welcome Lisa Quigley. Lisa serves as the director of the anti-hunger efforts for Tusk Philanthropies, working to combat food insecurity through coordinated campaigns across the country and increase the federal commitment to anti-hunger efforts. Lisa comes to Tusk Philanthropies with over 3 decades of leadership in politics and policy. She worked in the U.S. House of Representatives for 30 years for 4 members of Congress, including 2 members of the House leadership. Lisa is a voting rights expert and has advised politicians at all levels of government, including mayors and presidential candidates. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Dean Cobb. It's an honor to be with you today. I met Phil Williams in 2008, soon after I went to work as Chief of Staff for former Nashville Congressman Jim Cooper, who Phil had covered for years. I was new to town, and I was given valuable advice. If Phil Williams reaches out, take the call. If he asks you a hard question, always tell him the truth. And remember, if you try to avoid him, he will show up at your office with Brian. Wait until you leave and chase you down the street. Phil's dogged investigative skills and his use of video and social media to report his stories makes him the most important media player in the state. His famous Twitter X stopwatch, signaling a coming bombshell story, sends elected officials running for cover and the public later shocked by and grateful for his revelations. Phil Williams is feared by bad actors in Tennessee, but he is a hero to almost everyone else. Phil is despised by those who have betrayed the public's trust. He is sued, he is verbally abused, he is physically assaulted, he receives death threats. This is how the press is treated in a fragile democracy. For those who cling to democratic principles, conservatives and liberals alike, his courage is deeply admired. He is a defender of democracy in a state where it maintains a very fragile grip. Tennessee, once a moderate state that produced national leaders from both parties, is now plagued by the arrogance and manipulation of a supermajority and a thinned and timid press corps that is reluctant to challenge it. While Nashville was one of the first southern states to eliminate the poll tax, the supermajority has made it increasingly difficult to vote. It uses its power to gerrymander districts that are competitive only amongst extremes in primaries. This has led to increasingly low voter turnout in general elections, putting us at 49th or 50th nationwide. One party rule frequently invites corruption, and we have seen FBI investigations, federal charges against a Speaker of the House, and conviction of the former chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. In addition to straight-up corruption, the will of the voters of our state is regularly ignored. Despite lopsided polls to the contrary, we have an expanded Medicaid, there are almost no restrictions on gun ownership, and reproductive rights are now all but non-existent. This very week, hearings are taking place to determine if Tennessee will be the first state to ever reject billions in federal education dollars, an outcome that would most certainly harm all public school children, but especially rural, poor, and disabled ones. It is deeply unpopular with the public. Beyond corruption, we depend on Phil to cover in depth issues like this that make a difference in people's lives. Remarkably, he covers federal, state, and local affairs. With all the support of Lynn Plantinga and Channel 5, Bill does it all. Over the years, Phil and I developed a relationship. He would call me with questions, document requests, and ideas. Sometimes he would just reach out to say, "What's going on? What am I missing?" In recent years, there has been no shortage of stories. He exposes corruption, malfeasance, bribery, sexual harassment, abuse, and obscenely undemocratic practices on Capitol Hill, sometimes all at once. As the world watched this spring, our legislature famously expelled 2 young black legislators, demanding action after a school shooting. Bill was covering it, of course, but in a lesser-known display of impressive multitasking, he also confronted a legislator about alleged sexual harassment of an intern. So powerful is Phil Williams that the legislator resigned hours later, even before Phil's story aired. Throughout the state, as he holds the powerful to account, Tennesseans ask, but for Phil Williams, how would we have known? His work is more important now than ever. With the decline of quality local journalism, Williams has stepped further into the ever-widening gulf between stories that must be told and the absence of local reporters to cover them. In Nashville, our legacy newspaper has hired a reporter to cover nothing but Taylor Swift. On Monday, they hired a reporter to cover nothing but Beyoncé. This is not the same paper that we admired for years. It is not the same news organization that helped produce the likes of Tom Wicker, David Halberstam, and John Siegenthaler, and whose shoes Phil Williams walks. Awarding Phil Williams the John Chancellor Award validates real local journalism, where faith in our democracy begins. Citizens can work for meaningful change when they have factual information that only trusted media sources can provide. Gabrielle Hansen, who you've met, the disgraced mayoral candidate with ties to white supremacists, was not only exposed by Phil Williams and defeated soundly in her election last month, but it wasn't even close. Nothing else can properly explain the increase in voter turnout, an astounding 333%, except for Phil Williams' reporting. Pulitzer Prize winning author Ann Applebaum recently spent time in Tennessee, and as she put it to me, I cannot continue to write about fragile democracies in Eastern Europe without writing about fragile democracies in our own country. And while she concluded that Nashville is not yet Budapest on the Cumberland, she noted that the cascade of corruption and undemocratic behavior is reminiscent of other places around the world that she has covered. It's with that backdrop that we know how fortunate we are to have Bill Williams in Nashville, and we need more of him, especially now, in every city in America. Thank you.
Now we will present the 2023 John Chancellor Award. I would like to invite Gus and Josh Lipman to join me in presenting the award. And first we will hear from Gus.
Good afternoon. My father, Ira A. Lipman, loved this award and always scheduled the celebration on or near his birthday. Today would have been his 83rd birthday, and we honor his memory through the celebration of excellence in journalism. If he were here, he would say something like this. In 1957, the Arkansas National Guard was called out to prevent African American children from entering Central High School in Little Rock. To cover the event, NBC sent a young journalist named John Chancellor. Ira A. Lipman became a source for John Chancellor. Ira A. Lipman was the source to what was happening at Central High. John Chancellor was his insurance policy, his protection against the world's injustices. John Chancellor dispelled lies and ignorance through his reporting. For the first time, the new age of television journalism enabled the world to see the ugliness of racial hatred. And the result was a great advance for the cause of civil rights. That's why journalism is so important today and will be in the future. It is our first line of defense against those who would subject the world to lies and ignorance. By spreading light and truth, journalists have the power and influence to make the world a better place to live in, not just for a few, but for everyone. But it takes courage, character, and integrity. John Chancellor had that courage. Phil Williams does too. John Chancellor was my father's hero. He was his hero at age 16 in Little Rock, Arkansas. And he was his hero until his death because he represented the truth. When John Chancellor agreed to allow my father to create the John Chancellor Award for Excellence in Journalism, he envisioned rewarding the kind of journalism that would say to successive generations, this is the sort of work to which we should dedicate our lives. Phil Williams' work meets that test. He has championed the principles that make society more hospitable to both tolerance and truth. Phil, we honor the memory of John Chancellor by honoring your work. You have our admiration and gratitude for your contributions to journalism and to society. Please join us. So we were pleased to present you with the John Chancellor Medal for Excellence in Journalism and a check, which you've already received, for $25,000. My father always liked to hand the check, but we're very modern and we're very happy to use direct deposit. The citation reads, Phil Williams exemplifies the courage, integrity, curiosity, and intelligence that epitomizes the role of journalism in a free society. Congratulations.
I think we can get the three of us over here for a quick picture. Sure. And now we will hear a few words from Phil Williams, the 2023 John Chancellor Award honoree.
For the record, I have a reputation to protect. So if any of you saw me wiping my eyes, it's allergies. I wrote these first words earlier, but I don't think I fully appreciated. I am deeply, deeply touched by this incredible honor and all the kind words from my friends and colleagues. Thank you to the John Chancellor judges, and thank you to the staff, Abby and Lisa, who are just amazing. Thank you to the Chancellor family, and especially to the Lippman family, for keeping the memory of John Chancellor alive. And looking back at John Chancellor's career, I think I'm most drawn to that moment at the 1964 Republican National Convention when he signs off, this is John Chancellor somewhere in custody. That's the sort of tenacity that I can relate to very much. First of all, I want to thank the people who made this day so special, the people up here. Dwight, you always brought such empathy to your reporting that has been a model for me. And so I thank you for that example. Stuart, I don't know what to say. You made me a better reporter. You were the first person I ever knew who became obsessed with this notion of computer-assisted reporting. And you were so passionate, it made me a believer, and it changed my career. So I thank you for that. And Brian, you and I have been together on some of the best days of my life and the absolute worst day of my life. And there's a story there that we won't go into, but Brian has been there. I am so proud of the work that we have done together. And Lynn, you gave me the best gift that anyone could ever receive. You believed in me. And that meant so much, along with other members of the News Channel 5 management, Mike Cutler, Sandy Boonstra, Michelle Bonnet. You gave me the freedom to do the type of journalism that I had always longed to do. To my News Channel 5 Investigates colleagues who are here, I love the fact that we lift each other up, that it's so collaborative, that we make each other better. And you are a part of me as I am of you. And I love that part of our team. I also want to thank my first news director in television, Bill Lord, who helped launch this phase of my journey. The other thing I really like about this award is the recognition of the role of the source. Lisa Quigley is one of the many sources with whom I've worked to make this world a better place. Lisa and I were talking about voting and preserving democracy before it was cool to talk about preserving democracy. Kathy Sinback is here somewhere. Kathy and I worked together on a long-term project about the need for juvenile justice reform in our state. And there were just some heartbreaking stories that had to be told. And Gary Blackburn is here. Gary, we have accomplished so much together. I think the one that I hold most dearly is the special needs children who are being sexually assaulted repeatedly on their school buses in the city of Nashville. And together, we made a real difference in those children's lives. And most importantly, I want to thank my wife Cheryl and my son Jackson. Cheryl came into my life 7 years ago when I was not smiling a whole lot, but you helped me to learn to smile again. It is no accident, as someone suggested, that the most productive years of my career have been the years with you. There are times that this job is difficult on families. Excuse me, the allergies. There are times that this job is very difficult on families, but I am so thankful to have a partner who understands the need to do what's right, even if it is difficult. And my son, Jackson is back in the corner. I quickly had primary parenting responsibility with Jackson, and so he grew up in the newsroom. And for all those nights that I drug you to the newsroom, I'm sorry. But Jackson, you are easily the best accomplishment of my life. Finally, let me give a shout out to the local investigative journalists around the country, especially my friends in broadcast, who are also doing great work in their communities. Much has been written and discussed about the threats to democracy at the national level. But I would submit to you that democracy has been under attack at the state and local level for a very long time. As a journalist, as a citizen, I know there are just too few of us doing the kind of work that is necessary at the state and local level to preserve our democracy, which is why I take my responsibility, my calling so seriously. When times have been tough, my guiding mantra has always been, as Brian suggested, if I don't do it, who will? Recently, in a low moment, I briefly entertained the notion of, well, maybe I'll just leave it to someone else. But I quickly realized that I don't have that choice. None of us who believe in democracy have that option. If we listen to the loudest voices in the room, if we listen to the most hateful voices, if we let them to force us to shirk from our responsibility, then this American experiment will fail. And walking away from that responsibility is simply not an option. And as Stuart said, if you ask me, give me 3 minutes, I'll take 5. But finally, our company, the EW Scripps Company, has the motto, give light and the people will find their own way. And I really believe that, especially with the reception that we have seen in the city of Franklin based on our reporting about the mayoral candidate with her ties to white supremacy. It was so well received by the citizens. What it requires is a commitment to give light even when it's difficult. Thank you for recognizing a career that I hope has been a beacon of light to the communities that we serve. Thank you.
I'll just say two parting things. The first is that journalists are really a paradoxical lot of people. And you know, listening to Phil, I've had this thought before, but it really occurred to me again. Because almost by nature, of the nature of what we do, we see the worst of what people are capable of. If you go out into the city to report, you're going to encounter very likely people doing things they should not, that culminate in harm or difficulty to someone else. And the repeated exposure to all of this wrongdoing has to be counterbalanced by an impregnable, unassailable sense of idealism. That despite seeing the worst of what we do, this idealistic belief that if we give people information, we can remedy that wrongdoing and replace it with right. And it has to be an incredible gift to be able to hold on to that idealism, as well as an exercise and a practice to be able to hold on to that belief over the course of the very many years that you've been doing this. And so we thank you for that example, Phil. And the other thing is a footnote that I want to make note of, which is that I have on a purple vest and a purple tie. As you may have noticed, Josh and Gus have on purple ties and a lavender shirt. Lisa has a purple accent, and Abby has a purple accent, and the tables here are lavender. That was our subtle nod to Ira Lipman, who loved, whenever I would meet him for lunch, you know, he would invariably have on this like rich, beautiful purple tie. And sometimes he'd have a purple shirt, but I always associated purple with him. And so that's become a kind of unofficial John Chancellor Award tradition. And so, and John and Robe also have their purple accents. And so if you see it around the room, it wasn't coincidental. It wasn't that we're all Prince fans or anything like that. But that was our kind of ongoing tribute to Ira. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming out, and congratulations again to you, Phil, and thank you to all of our guests for coming as well.